Luke Sniewski, although the proper pronunciation is Luke Sniewski, right?
I think Sniewski is probably the more appropriate pronunciation as we're both Polish, but I was born in the States, and so obviously the Americanized English version of my last name is Sniewski. So yeah, Sniewski, we can go with Sniewski for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Luke Sniewski. Welcome to the Serpent's Path Conversations, which my podcast I created with people who went through the transformation, who share the experience of a self discovery. And I'm so excited to have you here in this podcast in my studio. Can you tell us more about yourself, and can you introduce yourself to us, because your signature says Assistant Director of Facilitation, Compassionate Inquiry, Facilitator, Mentor, Practitioner, and founder of Summerwise Healing Lab. And this is how we met. We've met through Compassionate Inquiry, and you are my mentor. Lucky me. Can you tell us more about yourself, what you do, and how would you like to introduce yourself?
That's a big, broad question, and I never know how to answer it. But I think I'll just take a little bit of a lead in from the name of your podcast. Did you say it's the Serpent's Way? The serpent, is that
Cypress Path, yeah.
the serpent's path? I love that. So for me, my life has been shedding layers like a serpent might. So I know that maybe I have some titles and who I am and where I am professionally today, personally as well, doesn't happen if I don't shed layers that no longer define me, but certainly contributed to who I am. I was a professional football player, and when I say football, I don't mean soccer. I mean American football, and that layer shed when my body collected some injuries that made it impossible to continue competing professionally. I was a certified public accountant, which isn't something people usually guess, and that's the equivalent of being a chartered accountant in other parts of the world.
Yes. Yes.
And sitting at a desk proved to be more dangerous to my body than playing football. So I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense. And then I really dove into my passion, which is related to just the human body. So starting in personal training and movement, massage therapy, nutrition,
Mhm.
just collecting as much information and experience as I could to really understand the human body. And no matter what I learned, it was never enough. There was always something that was preventing me from fully not just helping and supporting my own health and well-being, but also those around me and my clients. So I did eventually stumble upon accidentally meditation, and meditation became the cornerstone of my life personally and professionally. And through Vipassana and other retreats and other practices, it just slowly began deepening to the point that as I was working with people, it began transforming from simply physical and holistic, or from physical well-being to something far more holistic that included mental and emotional contexts. So, yes, I'm a therapist today, a somatic therapist. So I haven't let go of all the things that I learned and the things that I do practice, but the way that I do support people is less about getting a six pack and more about integrating emotional wounds
Mhm.
and processing past trauma.
Yes. Thank you. That was very broad answer to the short question, but as you said, it's very difficult to answer that question if you're kind of like trying to put your whole life into the small pill.
You give me a broad question, I'll give you a broad answer.
Thank you. You've done it well. Thank you so much. Okay, first question from my list of questions for you is that our work is to help people find the source of their suffering and truly see themselves for who they are in their essence. Can we discuss the less obvious form of trauma? Uh, and we call it a trauma with small t, and how that shows up in people's lives.
Right, I
Can you
think
elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that big T trauma are the things that sort of get the headlines and the news coverage, or the stories that make us gasp in horror, because those kinds of experiences should never happen to any child, right? So whether it's abuse or the list is quite extensive, but little t trauma to me is simply a universal experience because all of us are born with an infinite potential. Our nervous system can be shaped and formed in whatever direction. It's like I said, unlimited potential. And so when we apply or take that unlimited potential and try to squeeze it in a box of conditioning,
Mhm.
regardless of the household, regardless of the culture, regardless of the circumstances, taking infinity and condensing it down to a little box of conditioning is going to be traumatic for someone's nervous system because we learn how to survive within a specific context that we grow up in. But learning how to adapt and survive in any contexts comes with costs, it comes with sacrifices. So we literally have to sacrifice aspects of ourselves and our authenticity in order to survive in this context. And then as we get older, all of a sudden we start branching out of the little box that we grew up in, and we start seeing that maybe this way of being, this way of surviving, doesn't necessarily work for other environments that we might find ourselves navigating through, or it simply doesn't work for who we're evolving into and who we're becoming. Again, as we begin moving towards discovering who we are as people, discovering our authenticity, we quickly see that, you know what, maybe these rules and guidelines and behaviors that I learned as a child, these beliefs that I took on as a child that served me then, maybe they're not so helpful anymore. And not everybody, but many answer that call for change, right? It's like a deep calling that makes people say, start asking why and what's going on here. And I think that's the start of turning inwards, right? Going inward, discovering and exploring these small t traumas, which is nothing more than a series of adaptations that
Yeah.
we had to take on in order to survive. And then from there, consciously choosing if we want to move in a different direction. Knowing, in fact, maybe not knowing at first, but eventually coming to realize that moving in a different direction than what we've been conditioned to do is not a comfortable experience. Change requires work.
Mhm. Thank you very much for that. While you were explaining it, it just came to my mind that what I see very often is that people don't see that they have a trauma. Or they with the word trauma is also kind of like how do you call it? Is it was used and abused in our culture, specifically our Western culture, and it's got a bad rap. And also, people don't see that small trauma is not about something major that has potentially happened to you in the childhood. Is this little things that we do not understand as a children, but we have to, as you said, we have to adapt to it because this is what is required for us to feel safe, to feel to validate it, to feel seen, etc., etc., in a certain way. So yeah, thank you for that. And I'm gonna ask next question, which is kind of like related to this one. Why wasn't safe to be vulnerable in the first place? So what is that?
Why wasn't it safe to be vulnerable in the first place? I think specifically the answer may look different for each person, but generally speaking, what tends to happen is our caregivers and our environment don't understand how to relate and process and hold their own emotions. So when they witness the emotions of a small child, they may say things that are not intentionally small t traumas or result in small t traumas, but the consequences of on our nervous system do leave a mark. So when we tell a child, don't cry or don't be so sad or here, take this candy so you feel better, what we're
Mhm.
ingraining and reinforcing are these subconscious beliefs that our emotions aren't safe to experience, that it's not okay to feel all aspects of ourselves. And again, the environment is shaping unknowingly, and this is not an intentional process. This is done with either naive intentions or innocent intentions. It's not like you ask parents, uh, are, do you want to traumatize your child for the rest of their life? No, no parent, no right mind, no No authentic, I don't know what word, no, what's the word I'm looking for? No parent should ever want that, right? So if they
Yeah.
truly love their child. So, and yet here we are navigating that reality that um, if a child doesn't learn and isn't reinforced and supported through their emotional states by their external environment, they may automatically learn to relate to that inner experience in a way that's not necessarily um, productive and helpful for them in the long run. And of course, this doesn't just come from parents. This also comes from siblings and peers and classmates and teachers and students and media and shows and everything else that is collectively contributing to shaping the
Mhm.
initial mind or the initial personality of the child.
Yes. Thank you. And again, something came to my mind when you were sharing that um, that also affects us differently because we are different as well and got different personalities. And thinking of, ADHD or people on the different spectrums with the neurodivergent people, um, that's going to be a different sort of way of adapting and different way of dealing with difficult, situations and finding different type of coping mechanisms and whatever is kind of available at that time, um, considering environment you're growing up in, to kind of like fit in and pick up something that again is going to make you feel safe
Yeah,
and uh, kind of essential for the survival in some cases, right?
absolutely. And you mentioned a lot of different variations of us as humans.
Mhm.
Genetics also falls into that. I
Yeah.
think there's plenty of research to suggest that alcoholism isn't the thing that's genetic. It's the gene that makes us sensitive. So the more sensitive we are, and that is
Mhm.
genetically related and
Yeah.
influenced by genetics. If we're hypersensitive, then it makes us more susceptible to behaviors that are addictive because it's easier for those
Mhm.
sensitive individuals to cope with their challenging experiences with different
Mhm.
substances and behaviors. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. There's a lot of
Yeah.
variation here. I like to compare it to playing poker, right? So when
Mm.
we're playing poker, everyone gets a hand. We don't have control over the hand we're dealt. All of us have,
Mm.
one card might be our genetics, one card might be our environment, one card might be other things. Here's the hand that we're dealt. We
That's
don't
right.
control that part.
Yeah.
But once we have that hand in poker, we control how we play it. We control how we engage with this hand in relation to the
Mhm.
game. So I think it both invites us to be honoring and respectful of, hey, you know what, we don't have a lot of control over this in one regard, but then also empowering in the sense that, you know what, once we realize and become aware of our starting point, wherever that might be, once we see our hand, then moving forward, we can actually consciously impact our lived experience and even our physiology. So it's a nice balance of accepting the things that are outside of control and also empowering us to take charge and control and be proactive with the things that are within our realm of possibility, realm of control.
Yeah. Which again, something came to my mind. That's why some people struggle so much to actually find the little crack, the light coming through and to kind of take a turn. Why it takes for some not that much effort and for some needs to kind of like reach the rock bottom or being damp and then suddenly have that epiphany moment to kind of like think like what the fuck is going on, why am I surrounded by these people, who's my friends, like why did I allow myself to be treated that way, like why we, it's like some of us cannot wake up to this.
I appreciate the question, and you mentioned earlier that of my involvement with compassionate inquiry, and I do think that CI shaped me significantly professionally. It's an
Yeah.
organization that I love and hold near and dear to my heart. And one of the central tenets of CI when we do work with clients is to trust the client's process.
Mm.
And it's an honoring and a respecting that every person is on their own journey. And journey is such a good word to describe this
Yeah.
because it's not like a short trip. it's not like a straight line from A to B. This is a journey.
Yeah.
This is an odyssey. This is an
That's it,
expedition.
Odyssey. I love that
You
word.
know, this
It's like
this is
never ending,
yeah,
long journey
yeah. There,
to
you know,
the
there
other universe or the corners of the universe.
not just that, but every person is their own universe with their own programming, genetics,
Mm,
personality, shaping, interests, motivations. And for the only thing we can really focus on is our own journey and how we navigate that. So while some, you know, and here's the other thing: is it true? Is it necessarily true that every person has to quote unquote heal? You know,
yeah,
when I work with clients, I realize quite quickly one out of every many clients, there's always one that really wants to go deep. And I
yeah.
love that. I love the clients that just want to completely shed all the layers of their on their serpent's
Mm,
path, and they want to get rid of it
mm,
all and really understand life from a completely different perspective. And those clients pull different questions and words and information out of me. And then there are clients who just say, hey, you know what? I just want to enjoy my lunch without my mind being elsewhere. I just want to have a cleaner, more peaceful relationship with my kids and my wife. Great, let's work
yeah.
on that. So it's meeting the person where they're at, and it's not rushing the
Mm,
process, because we have to appreciate that again. Every person's on their own journey, and maybe, just maybe, they need to have this experience of non non-comprehensive deep healing in order to catalyze something deeper in the future. That really and it also means for us as therapists, we can take a step back and just really be present with this person and meet them where they're at and show up with authenticity, attunement, and presence to meet their intentions and goals.
absolutely. Do you wish that for all your friends to to wake up? It's like who are
No,
you surrounded by? Is that all
it's
your friends or awakened people, or like how does that work?
it's lovely. I consider myself to be a completely normal human being, and I love that, within my role in CI and as a teacher and as a therapist, yeah, sometimes I have a different role for these different nervous systems where
Yeah,
I am a teacher or a therapist or a guide or a facilitator, and that sort of invites and evokes different aspects of myself to be expressed. But I completely love that all of my friends are not in this industry, and I can
mm.
just be myself, and I can allow the other parts of myself to express
Yes.
the crude humor, the relaxed, just enjoying food, not having the deep conversations, and just hearing about the normal everyday challenges outside of therapy, outside of the world of trauma, outside of the world of mindfulness and meditation. I don't. I am quite happy, and I love the diverse friend group that I've been blessed with, because it really invites me and allows me to just be a normal human being rather than the role that I have to take in some of the other contexts of my life.
Absolutely. And also, what I would add to it, that is actually quite tiring if you go and you
Yeah,
hear yet another conversation that you think like, okay, I know what to do about this, but I'm
yeah.
so tired.
Yeah, in fact, even when friends, and I've made this mistake a couple times, where a friend reaches out and say they want therapeutic support, I won't do it. I won't do it again, because it's not the role that I have in their life. So it already
Mm,
shapes and changes. So even when it's not necessarily a formal therapeutic
yeah,
relationship, but any friend that reaches out now, I'm like, hey, I've got a therapist for you and I can refer you someone, but I am not that person for you. I'm not that person in your life. And I don't want that. I don't want our relationship and friendship to be impacted by something like this, which requires a very different dynamic and a very
yes,
different way of being.
yeah, yeah. You don't want to stop them to like you because you're gonna tell them off about some stuff that they don't hear.
Yeah, I turn that brain off. Well, I don't turn it off because it's always on. It just happens, but I don't pay attention to it because I just want to be a friend. I just want to be a human being.
Yes,
That's it. Yeah.
I understand. I'm the same. Although sometimes I'm not gonna lie, it sneaks in because I think it's just, since the compassionate inquiry is part of my lifestyle, it's just I live by the rules. I live by the rules of CI. So it's kind of like sometimes I'm catching myself on things, but Most of the time, I'm the same. Okay, we're gonna move to something which is the I believe I believe is your core work at the moment, which is what do you know about core beliefs? And how many different core beliefs are there, and why is it so difficult for people to recognize them?
Hmm.
Why we never think about core beliefs when we are like stuck, when we call it we are I'm stuck.
Well, because, core beliefs don't start as beliefs. We'll start with that. And core beliefs start as adaptive behaviors. And
Mhm,
those adaptive behaviors, imagine having to learn that in order to maintain um, connection with family members, we have to hide a certain emotion. Oh, because I realize mom and dad get really upset when I'm sad or angry, so I have to I have to not feel those. And then every time that anger or sadness may come up, we learn through behaviors to sort of push it down. And we do this over time until at one point, at some point in life, and this doesn't happen for everyone, it only happens for those that feel called to do this kind of work. Someone may say, I've realized that I can't feel my sadness, or I realize that I have a really hard time expressing my anger. And the only time I can express anger is when I explode because it's just too much to hold. And maybe
yeah.
that's a common experience for a lot of people. And then they get curious. So they might go to therapy and, like, I'm having this issue. And then they start looking backwards. So then they start looking and examining their behaviors. They're like, oh, look, as a kid, I used to do this. And then I did this and I did this and I did this. Oh my God, I must have believed that I my emotions weren't safe to feel, that I wasn't allowed to feel my emotions, that for some reason my emotions weren't worth it, weren't worthy of expression. So the
Mhm,
belief is the story that we put on top of the adaptive behavior that's helped us survive and adapt. So
mhm,
the reason it's unconscious is because it didn't start as a conscious manifestation or a conscious response to the environment. It was
mhm,
again a conditioned reaction that was embedded and continued
mhm,
on. So that's why it stays unconscious until we bring consciousness to it. In
mhm,
terms of core beliefs, however, there seems to be, for me, it's like this never-ending or ever-deepening rabbit hole that I keep plummeting into and trying to learn more about, because I love working with beliefs. I love understanding myself in that regard. It's
mhm,
actually quite freeing to realize that many of the rules that I've operated my life from, and again, my hope is that I navigate my clients through such insights as well, is that all of these beliefs are just stories. They're just ways of understanding what happened to us. So they're not necessarily
mhm,
true. And I know that sometimes when people talk about core beliefs, I'm stupid, I'm weak, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, um, I'm never going to succeed, I'm a failure. Like, there's a lot of core beliefs supposedly. And for a lot of time, I was under the belief that, or I was under the belief, I was under the belief that there was only one core belief beneath the surface of all of those. That really
mhm,
beneath the surface of all of that is the seed of I'm not good enough, right? I'm not enough, or another variation on that is something is wrong with me. Something is
mhm.
inherently wrong with me. And
Fundamentally wrong with me,
yeah,
yeah.
fundamentally wrong with me. And so
Mhm,
people, the more we look, the more we may see that as a possible core belief and explanation for why we behaved that way.
mhm,
And I'm going to take this two ways. Firstly, there's two ways to navigate the discussion from this point. The first is to say, you know what? There's actually a deeper belief that is responsible for our suffering. Because if we take the belief on that I'm not good enough, then unconsciously we're creating a world that perpetuates and supports that belief that I'm not
yes.
good enough.
Yeah.
And so again, it's unconscious because we're surrounded by it. It's like there's a cartoon where there's two fish swimming in water, and then another fish sort of swims by and says, "Hey guys, how's the water?" And then swims away. And then one of the fish looks at the other and says, "What's water?" right? So we're literally swimming in our core belief because our entire world has been shaped and formed by this unconscious way of navigating the world. So of course it's unconscious. But beneath I'm not good enough is another core belief. In fact, there's another two core beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And the core beliefs below that are I am. So anytime we say I am and we attach anything after the am, it's already a limitation, it's a story. And in fact, if we got rid of the am, spiritually speaking from Eastern philosophies, as soon as we have the belief of I is the where the suffering starts. And if we think
Mm-hmm.
about all the times that we're stressed, anytime that we're triggered, angry, emotional, activated, it's because our sense of self is being activated. We're taking something personally. Some aspect of ourself is under attack. So technically, the seed of suffering is I'm not good enough. If we want to go really deep, the seed of suffering is I. And I is the first belief and story we were told, right? So here we're born, and what do our parents do? They give us a name, and we
Yeah.
give ourselves a nickname for that name. The nickname for that name is I. Right? So regardless of all our
Mm-hmm.
names individually, the name that I eventually gave myself is I. And as soon as I give myself that identity, I'm
Mm-hmm.
protecting and I'm wasting a lot of energy to maintain that identity, that story. And I want everyone
Mm-hmm.
else to believe that story of Luke or I. So okay, that's the philosophical, way of digging really deep into this aspects of core beliefs. But here's the more practical thing that's probably more accessible for anyone watching this. And that's that, I said um, that core belief is a story. It's a myth. It's just some a thought or a way of understanding why we behaved a certain way.
Yeah.
It's equally possible that that story isn't the story of I'm not good enough. It's a story of, wow, look at how incredibly adaptable this small child was to their environment. Because we, as mammals, as humans, we have a biological imperative to connect, to belong, to be in community. Without community, we die, like
Yeah.
literally. And so we're programmed for that on a cellular level to seek belonging. So that
Mm-hmm.
child, when they're 3 years old and they're trying to keep mom and dad happy, what rational human being would walk up to a 3-year-old and say, God, you're such a people pleaser. Do you see what you're doing? You're sacrificing your authenticity to be just a people pleaser. That's not the case. Every cell of their body is biologically inclined to survive. So they are unconsciously seeking attachment. So it's an unconscious biological, neurophysiological movement towards attachment. That's not the
Yeah.
belief of I'm not good enough. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not good enough is just a label we put on top of that unconscious yearning and survival instinct. If people begin to explore and truly understand that every one of their beliefs, every one of their habits, every one of their um, addictions, behaviors, whatever
Labels,
it is, everything,
identifiers, those, yeah.
everything,
Mm-hmm.
if they begin to see that every one of them was just an unconscious attempt to maintain attachment and thus survival, the consequence tends to be more softening and understanding of that to say, you know what? That kid didn't have any other choice. I didn't have any other choice. I had to survive. And when we're able to label or see the story in a different way, it does allow us to relate to it in a different way. So I do think that sort of going through the journey of seeing the story of I'm not good enough can be quite therapeutic, liberating, and helpful, but it's a first step. If we stop at I'm not good enough, we're not seeing the truth. We're only
Mm-hmm.
seeing a story and we're getting stuck on a story. There's something deeper, and that's the objective reality that our body is designed for connection. We yearn for it, we crave it, we need it for survival. When we're able to go to that truth, it allows us to break free of all of those stories.
Thank you.
That was a
Something
long
came into
answer.
my. That was very long answer because it's your favorite subject, so you can't stop. And my questions are also quite open ended.
That's true.
um, what I wanted to ask, because something came to my mind, you also mentioned on our last CI conference because you were doing this beautiful talk as well about the core beliefs. You said something that core belief actually helps us to move forward. Am I correct that this is something that also there is a fear behind that, of course, but this is kind of like progressive fear, fear that kind of makes us to move, fear, a fear that stimulates us to search for the answers. So behind that there is this core belief, or there is this belief about ourselves, but in the same time this is kind of like a platform to to search.
I would say that, not simply the impetus or impulse to search deeper for answers, right? I would say that
Mm,
many of our greatest life accomplishments, you can hang it on that core belief of, um, I probably wouldn't have pursued sports or done this, that, or all these different things that we do as human beings, the achievements and accomplishments. If we ask that person, well, if you believed you were fundamentally perfect as you were, would you have done all
mm.
that? Would you have
Yeah,
pushed yourself that
that's right.
much? And the answer is
Exactly.
probably no, because we would say no. We would honor that. Maybe we would honor that moment. But so in some regards, that belief or that story drives us to discover
Mm,
more of ourselves, to experience life, to uncover nuances of our personality. And so again, for me, it's not a villainization of that story. I don't think there's um, anything like, if we're moving away from a core belief, and I use this analogy in the presentation. Imagine the seed that grows into a small tree, that grows into a fully mature tree. That seed of not good enough eventually shapes the tree of our life, which is all the relationships, contexts,
yeah.
preferences, the activities that we like, whatever it may be. I'm not
Yeah.
saying, well, this belief is wretched, so let's cut down this tree and start over. No, this is who we are.
Mm,
And we can also, once we're consciously aware of it, begin to choose in this moment, in this context, in this relationship, do I want to navigate this present moment reality under that story of I'm not good enough? And
mm.
many times, certainly as we get over, the answer is no, because at some point, believing we're not good enough doesn't assist us professionally or personally, certainly in our maybe our interpersonal relationships. It's probably not helpful and healthy for ourselves or the relationship to believe that we're not good enough when in a relationship with our children or our spouses or even our clients.
Yeah.
And so having the capacity to be aware of, there it is, there's that impulse driving me down this behavioral pathway. Maybe in this moment I'll try something new. Maybe I'll meet this moment in a completely new way, not
Yeah.
operating under that old unconscious way of being.
Mm,
And this might also be true for physical accomplishments like sports stuff, where sometimes the body says no through
yeah.
injuries and other things. Professionally, sometimes the mind and body say no, and we burn out and we fatigue, and we say, you know what? Maybe I don't need to go get that 20th certification or that credential or that training. Maybe I'm enough as I am, to really recalibrate and honor what is it that's actually serving me. And am I, a question I had to ask myself, because I was a serial book collector and a serial book reader. I had to ask myself, am I buying this book because I believe I'm not good enough in this moment? And I would say 90% of the time it was that. It was some kind of fear that was leading to this impulse of buying a book and reading it. I was like, oh, if I read this information, then I'll know enough and then I'll be enough. Rather than now, my professional development is my daily meditation. For
Yeah.
me, settling into my body, settling into the present moment is probably the most important professional course I can do on a daily basis for
Yeah.
myself and my clients. So yeah, I think it can be a driving force. And if we're not paying attention, it can be a destructive force. I think the balance is in the middle. How do we
Yeah.
utilize who we are? How do we stay with how do we keep the path of the middle? I don't think this is a passive path of like we don't do anything. Obviously, I'm good enough as I am, so I'm not going to engage in life. No, nor am I saying you have to burn out. I'm saying there's this middle path where we're meeting
Yeah.
ourselves in a world in a gentle way. Our body isn't collecting chronic stress. It's experiencing hormetic stress. Hormetic stress is a phrase that's used for a stimulus that is
Hmm.
just large enough to initiate a physiological reaction or activity,
Yes.
but not so great that it
So
injures or
not that you
harms the
jump
body.
to the, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, how do we maintain that level of stress that's healthy for our organism and healthy for our development, but not so stress free that it's not healthy, and not so stressful that it's destructive?
Yeah.
That's the path, the middle.
I think I know the pill, but I've got a question about that later on, so I'm gonna move on. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And I hope everyone, most of the people's gonna find it helpful. I will certainly ask more follow-up questions, but I want to ask you something else. Why therapy is for everyone?
Therapy depends
Is
on your
it? Is
death.
it for everyone?
That's what I was gonna move towards.
Mm,
For me, the starting point for that answer would be, what is your definition of therapy? If we define therapy as a relational container where an individual is allowed to authentically express and explore their inner world with non-judgment and conscious responsiveness, then I would
mhm.
say therapy is essential for everybody. And that doesn't necessarily mean that a therapist is the person driving that process. I think that if we as human beings were taught to listen and listen deeply to one another, the need for therapists, I'd be out of a job,
Mhm.
because that container is so sacred. I also think that this attunement process, right? So it's not just a space for voice and words.
Yeah, yeah.
This relational container is also energetic. Our nervous systems are also listening to
More
one
than
another.
everything else, in my opinion.
Thank you. In fact, not just more, you're right, it's not just more. Maybe 95% of that exchange,
Hmm.
95% of that exchange is
It's,
happening
yeah,
unconsciously. It's happening through subconscious processes in our body. So when we do have a container where there's a regulated, calm, open, balanced, loving, compassionate presence and nervous system in front of you, as soon as another person gets into that field, that person's energetic field, their nervous system and physiology will calm. And this is
absolutely.
this is why, right
Amen.
now, uh,
Amen.
yeah, but this is also an important thing for all therapists, maybe people to hear. When when there was a fear, and maybe that fear is still quite rampant, around the AI taking therapists' jobs,
Yeah,
I think AI only solidifies my role as a therapist. There is no way an AI can attune to a nervous system and
yeah,
feel the way another
yeah,
human being can. This is why AI may always have more information and have access to more cognitive processes or responses. It will
yeah,
never replace true and authentic therapy, because true healing doesn't happen through speaking.
yeah,
True healing happens through the felt sense, through that container that's created through a therapist and a client. And again, the container may not be a therapist. It could be a group setting. It could be a retreat. It could be a lot of different contexts that create this container of energetic holding for the person. AI can't do that. AI can't go there.
yeah,
So it's
absolutely. I
so
mean,
there's
I feel like it's going to be other way around. I mean, all the fake therapists, coaches, whatever, is going to drop off because obviously, if you're only doing your work through talk, not kind of a building, not reciprocating the other person's, experience and feelings, etc., not creating a safe, attuned space, then you won't be, you potentially might be out of your job. But then, you know,
that
baby
that's
steps, I guess. So
no, that's
it's
a
we
sincere
all.
and Uh, Gosh, that's a really powerful insight, because I do think that
Mm,
if a therapist has been relying solely on protocols and focusing on the protocol
yeah,
rather than the person,
yeah,
that may be understandably distressing, because
yeah,
a protocol and just responding to certain diagnostic criteria or specific stepwise
Absolutely.
treatment plans, then you know what? AI can be quite a powerful tool. And it can even support therapists who, right now I'm hearing all the therapists who are using AI to create clinical and case notes. I'm like, that's a great use of time. So yeah.
Mhm.
So I think it has a role, but I don't think it's going to replace us anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, I think it's going to put more light on people who are, not actually serving well other people, and they actually create a not safe space for others, as you just said, and we kind of also moving more into, well, not moving, but maybe it's becoming more and more popular to use a plant medicine and psychedelics to in a therapeutic environment. And for that, you definitely need a safe space. You definitely someone attuned, trauma trained, and so I'm there with you. Okay, we've got not much time left, so I'm going to go to another very interesting and quite deep sort of exploration. I think we're gonna potentially gonna finish with that, but I wanted to move to your book actually now. So this is Luke's book. That's my notes with the questions. uh, that's beautiful, very nicely written in a very simple, accessible language to ADHD people. So please, whoever is struggling to understand some kind of therapeutic terms, this book is it's for you. My question is, where are we? The noise. How the noise? I love that. The noise, how the noise manifests in the relationships. And me as a ADHD person who's got rejection dysphoria syndrome, no, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, that's what it's called, and other, many not diagnostic symptoms of
Mhm.
ADHD. I know how this bloody noise manifested in my previous relationships, and I actually how it kind of screwed up my relationship. So can
Yeah.
you speak to it a little bit, please?
You're right. This is going to take a few minutes. I'm going to start with a bigger picture sort of observation here. And I might have and might still, in some contexts, sort of self identify with ADHD symptoms.
Hmm.
Maybe if I went and got a test, or if I went to a specialist, maybe I might even have been
Hmm.
given the label at some point in my adolescence, childhood, or even adult life. Certainly, I also know myself that my professional life, I have structured my life in a way that if I do have ADHD, it's perfect because I can't do a 9 to 5. I wouldn't be able to be in an office. I wouldn't be able to have that kind of lifestyle. I wouldn't be able to do something repetitive for 8 hours a day for a significant time. It would be very taxing on my neurophysiology. So yes,
Yeah.
in that regard, I might say, I have ADHD and I'm glad that I can change my role every day and do different. My every day is completely different. And I will also say there's plenty of, you know, it's becoming quite trendy. And I think that society is shaped in a way that we're being hyperstimulated and we're not being taught how to
Hmm.
focus our attention or concentrate. And we're
Yeah.
not doing the hard work of actually sitting still.
Hmm.
I know 100% that my capacity to focus and be present with my son and my
Hmm.
wife and my clients is directly connected to the amount of practice that I'm doing. So if I stop practicing, if I don't do my daily meditations, all of a sudden my mind is here and I'm more fidgety. So if I take care of my body and I take care of my mind through that daily, my ADHD medication is meditation. If I do
Hmm.
that, I am still and I'm able to do that. Without that capacity for me, this is what I've discovered. This is the segue into the noise. Without that capacity to be still and anchored to my body and to be able to see my thoughts rather than being enmeshed with my thoughts and identifying with my thoughts, I would simply be swimming with my thoughts and the noise becomes my reality. And the tragic part that when we enmesh and believe every thought in our mind, and we believe all those anxious thoughts and fear based thoughts and those worst case scenarios, we react to those thoughts as if they're real. And then we actually create the very circumstances that our noise is trying to um,
Mhm.
make us avoid because we're so scared. Imagine being able to see the thoughts as if they're a cloud by going onto the mountain with binoculars and watching the clouds pass. That's what it's like to be in the body. So when we come back into the body, we come back to this grounded, solid place, and we're able to look and see our thoughts.
Mhm.
When we begin to see our thoughts, we separate from our thoughts, and it's our first step from not believing the noise.
Yeah.
At first, it takes practice. It's like it's we're practicing. We may believe something so firmly that it's impossible for us to behave in any other way other than that. But there may be smaller contexts that say, let's say someone grew up thinking that if they eat an egg, that they'll grow a sixth finger, right? So I know this isn't a completely insane thought, but maybe someone believed it so immensely that they were fused with that fear based thought that they said, nope, I will never eat that egg because I don't want to grow another digit. And then they one day try an egg. And then what happens when they don't believe their noise? They see the reality they experience. And so
Mhm.
I think that we have to, through experimentation, and sometimes this is uncomfortable experimentation, we have to learn that not all of our thoughts are true. And in fact,
Yeah.
most of our
Most.
thoughts,
Yeah.
most of the fears that we have are simply
Mhm.
not on, they're not going to happen. And for me, I called it the noise because it was a playful way of navigating this experience. And certainly for me, and maybe others, a lot of fears come to the surface when we're in relationship with other people. Like you said,
Mhm.
rejection, maybe jealousy, maybe distrust, all these different fears that come to the surface when we're in intimate relationship with someone. So the noise was this playful term that I came up with my wife in the early stages of our relationship, where we were able to speak about our thoughts in a way that allowed them to not be us, but allowed us to be in communion with each other as we examine this thing that we have no control over.
Yeah.
Because the noise I have in my head, I don't control. The noise you have in your head, Gosha, you don't control. It's just thoughts that happen.
No. Yes. Yeah.
However, when this noise, and I'll give a personal example because it might be helpful. When jealous thoughts came up or whatever it may be, if I reacted to it with to my now wife and said something like, you're doing this, or this is happening, or it
Yeah.
it created a separation. It created a you versus me, and now we're defending our positions. When I
Yeah.
was able to communicate, and we learned, and she did this for her noise and I did it for my noise, and it was a beautiful way that we learned not to take each other's thoughts personally. We were able to come together and examine the content of the thoughts and say, this is somewhat ridiculous, right? So we would laugh at it and play with it, because I would say, hey, the noise is saying this, or my noise is saying that. And by saying that, it's like I'm inviting her into my personal world, and we're
Yeah.
looking up at those clouds together from that mountain. And it did create, and it's funny because those moments that might have triggered relationship discord and tension instead created, communion and connection and vulnerability, and really allowed us to get to know each other. For
Yeah.
me to understand, hey, okay, I was able to see and understand what her fears were, and I was able to respond to those fears, knowing, oh, this one of those moments that your noise is saying this. Well, great. And then I might offer a, well, do you want to hear the truth of what's happening, or what do you need? What do you need in response to the
Mm.
noise, right? So we
Mm.
were just able to support each other and navigate it to the point that many of our fears, especially, of course, I can speak mostly for myself. I was
Mm.
able to move through relationship trauma that had literally scarred and damaged and destroyed every single relationship I'd ever had, related to trust, related to a lot of these contexts. So it
Yeah.
was the most healing experience to have a companion in that. Not necessarily, it's not that my wife became a therapist. It wasn't that. It was a way of learning how to speak about a phenomenon in an
Mhm.
objective way that I didn't attach my identity to it, and I didn't blame
Yeah.
her. I didn't blame her and make her responsible for that noise
Mm.
either. And that was the art of it, learning how to communicate that in a way that I wasn't blaming or making her responsible for it,
Yeah.
but I was also not victimizing myself and trying to move away from this as well. So it's a bit of an art to navigate
Yeah.
a situation like that.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think Um, I agree with everything you said, but I think it also you need to prepare the ground for it, and I think there is needs to be a little bit of work done beforehand because with this trust, with this safe container, with this not being afraid of sharing, being vulnerable, and having this honest conversation no matter what that needs a lot of pausing, that needs a lot of self reflection, that needs a lot of curiosity and kind of like self discovery before we enter that world
From both people, not just one.
from
And I
from
and
both
I
people.
and I
From both
love
people.
that and I love that you shared that because when we start on this journey of self-change, oftentimes we have a bullseye, like that's where I want to go. And we're not going to
Yeah.
get to the bullseye the first time. So
Yeah.
the first time, and I often say this when I work with couples, because I love working with couples, because fundamentally what I work with when I work with couples is helping them to communicate and understand each other. And we may try to speak from that place, and unintentionally, even though our intentions are there, best of intentions, we're not speaking from a place of personal responsibility or not
No.
blaming. We automatically use language that is actually very blaming and very victimizing, and we're not aware of it. However, it's part of the learning process because we're trying something new, and because this is a new skill, because this is a new language, we're essentially learning a completely new language and way of
Yes.
communicating with about ourselves and with ourselves, and about a person and with another person. And we have to give ourselves the gift and quality of patience and non-judgment as we move through acquiring a new skill that takes a lot of practice.
Absolutely. All right. Can I ask one more question?
You got one more.
Yes. Yes. Uh, it's, it's not a small question. Again, I'm gonna just read something from your book. I know I have to concentrate on one thing. It's too much. Porn, as it turns out, is an incredibly effective topic to open men up about other issues in their lives. I'm asking that, and I'm asking you to elaborate on it. You also mentioned this very useful quote from that you came across that has been used for recovering alcoholics. You are the only No, you're only sorry, I can't see it because it's dark here.
You're only as sick as your secrets.
That's right. Thank you very much. So can you, I don't know, can you do it in 5 minutes?
No, what I
Elaborate about
when I
the
was doing my
passage.
PhD, yeah, I can elaborate. When I was doing my PhD research and I'm working with these study participants,
Hmm.
it was never my intention to do therapy. I was already working as a counselor, but I really
Hmm.
wanted to, my intention was to be a researcher, an objective researcher.
Hmm.
And when you're doing an open interview and you're opening up a subject that has been riddled with shame and
Yes.
embarrassment and guilt, and most
Hmm.
of the men had never spoken to anyone about their porn use. And all of a sudden, I'm asking questions, diving deep into the context and the origins of why and when they started and why they use, why they watch porn, all these different questions. Of course, that's going to be therapeutic. Of course, they're going to open up and share their secrets because they've never shared with anyone. And because and I don't know, maybe because again, my book talks about my own journey through porn addiction. So I knew that here I am interviewing them objectively. I was actually objective. I was like, yeah, because there was no judgment from my end. In fact, my
Yeah.
subjective bias was that I could see their wholeness.
Yeah.
I could know without a doubt that there's another way. There's a way out of the challenge that they were faced with. And this is not to say porn is inherently bad or wrong. These are for participants who identified as having a problematic relationship with porn.
Yeah.
And so when I was able to speak with these men at the end of the interviews, they were able to share, they usually shared, you know what? I feel like a whole load has been lifted from my shoulder. I feel so much better. I feel like I've already started my pathway out of porn. And for me, that was like crap. You weren't supposed to be moving away from porn until we started the meditation, because my research was focused on meditation as an intervention for porn use, not this intro interview. And yet, the intro interview was a significant intervention for many men.
Yeah. Thank you. That was quick. That was quick. And thank you for sharing. And a little bit of sharing from my side. Porn on the women's side is also not investigated enough. And I'm a good example of it. I was in a deep shame, and my porn addiction probably started when I was 7 or 8 year old. It was introduced by my slightly older colleague, but I it served its purpose. It was the addiction. It was something that was giving me a control over something, and it was keeping me safe. So, I wanted to go a little bit deeper in through that route of the deep shame that is kind of shaping, and as we said at the very beginning of the conversation, how we pick up our addictions, if that makes sense, or how we
Yeah,
pick up our coping mechanism, because it's this specific type of sensitivity and triggers that brings this all together, that gives us something very specific at that very moment, that we need this injection of dopamine. And that's why porn subject is also very interesting to me, because I kind of feel like this is why I went that route. There wasn't
yeah,
something else, it was actually this, for
yeah.
some
I mean,
reason.
I
I
just
mean,
want to
for the good
acknowledge,
reason.
Gosha, your vulnerability and strength and authenticity, because it's very rare that women do talk about their porn use.
Mhm.
And so it's just starting with men opening up about it, and for more and more women to open about the impact that porn has on them. Obviously, it might be less spoken about, but we don't know the severity,
Mhm.
the degree, and how women are being impacted by porn, which would be fascinating to learn more. So I just really appreciate you opening up that conversation and topic just in these few short moments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not going to ask about meditation, which is the core of, getting deeper into our healing journeys and rediscovering and self reflections, and, opening the space for healing in a community. But maybe we can chat about it next time. Maybe we need another conversation in a few months' time to tackle different topics.
Let's see how it goes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Lots of very useful information for myself, always learning, and for others, I hope. And I hope to see you in not too long, because I need to speak to you anyway about our mentorship, our relationship in the other on the other spectrum. Um, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Gosha. It was a pleasure for the lovely conversation. I'm sure we'll be in future connections for sure.
Thank you.